Breaking news out of Cleveland. Jimmy Haslam is fed up. Kevin Stefanski and Tommy Reese might actually be done. And the shocking name being mentioned right now, Jon Gruden. Jon Gruden rumored to be next Cleveland Browns offensive coordinator. The Cleveland Browns haven't made any official, but league insiders are buzzing louder than the dog pound in December. Multiple sources around the NFL are suggesting that Jon Gruden is not only a candidate for the Browns offensive coordinator job, he's essentially the candidate. While the Browns have remained tight-lipped, several personnel executives around the league told ESPN Cleveland that the team has been in advanced discussion.
There is going to be a huge earthquake in the Cleveland Browns organization that will send shockwaves through the whole National Football League. And what we are about to tell you will completely change what you thought you knew about the future of this team. Get ready, football fans. The news we have found is so shocking, so new, and so game-changing that it will be all over the NFL news for weeks to come. Many people have suspected this for months, but no one wanted to say it out loud. Now, several league insiders are confirming it. There aren't many days left for Kevin Stefanski to be the head coach of the Cleveland Browns. And we aren't talking about weeks or even months anymore. It is possible that the hammer will fall in days or even hours and this whole coaching system falls apart. The whispers began softly, as they always do in NFL circles. People are talking here and there, and some people who are close to the organization are talking on the condition of anonymity because the information is so sensitive that careers could be ruined if names were attached too soon. But now the whispers have turned into roars. And what seemed like speculation just a few days ago is quickly becoming an undeniable fact. Jimmy Haslam, the owner of the Cleveland Browns, has been in charge of one of the most dysfunctional decades in NFL history.
Why would this come out now? I think everybody knows why this would come out now, because there would be a possibility. And I think it kind of speeds up the clock on a lot of things going well. And I heard Baskin and Phelps talk about it yesterday. I think that they were right about it. I think there was not a lot that could be refuted. I heard Nick and Jonathan yesterday. I think they were right about it. And when you hear different people, you'd love to come up with a different spin, but I don't think there's very much of a different spin. Is that, yeah, there's definitely a possibility that this could happen, and you want your name out there, or your agent wants your name out there, I should say, to be into consideration, because, again, fans have a lot of power over a lot of things. Movers and shakers have a lot of power over that. And so I can't say, well, he's bracing to get let go, but you don't put this out there for no reason. Because before, like, Dan Orlovsky would get into it with.
Now, finally, he is ready to do what everyone has been asking him to do. He is ready to fire Kevin Stefanski and change the entire offensive coaching staff. And the person who will take their place is someone no one saw coming. But when you think about it, it makes perfect sense. Jon Gruden. Yes, that Jon Gruden. He used to be the head coach of the Raiders and Buccaneers, and now he is an ESPN Monday Night Football analyst. He became famous for his love of football and his knowledge of quarterbacks. He won a Super Bowl and became known as one of the most creative offensive minds of his time. Reports say that Jon Gruden is not only a candidate for the job of offensive coordinator for the Cleveland Browns. Several people who know what is going on say that he is the candidate, the only candidate, and the deal is done. It just needs to be made public. If these sources are right, and everything we have heard so far points to them being right, Gruden could be in Cleveland as soon as Monday to start his new job running an offense that has been a total disaster under Kevin Stefanski's watch. Let us talk about how we got to this crazy moment in Cleveland Browns history. The story behind the story is almost as interesting as the news itself. Kevin Stefanski has been in a tough spot all season. Everyone knows that. His offense has been completely useless, coming in near the bottom of the league in almost every important statistical category. Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett, Dylan Gabriel, and now Shedeur Sanders has all taken turns playing quarterback. But none of them have been able to make the old-fashioned offensive system work. The play calling has been so predictable and safe that it hasn't worked at all. The offensive line has had trouble protecting the quarterback. The running game hasn't always been good, and through it all, Stefanski has blamed others, made excuses, and refused to take full responsibility for the problems that have been happening on his watch. But the real breaking point, the moment when Jimmy Haslam seemed to say, "Enough is enough," was how Stefanski dealt with the Shedeur Sanders case. Paul DePodesta, the team's general manager at the time, told Sanders not to be drafted in the 5th round. He reportedly wanted nothing to do with the pick by national analysts and millions of Colorado fans who followed Sanders from Boulder. He knew the stress would be too much for him to handle, so he didn't want to be a part of it. But Jimmy Haslam went against his general manager's wishes and chose Sanders anyway, not mostly because of football reasons. Though Sanders is definitely talented, Haslam probably knows more about the business side of the NFL than he does about the football side. Shedeur Sanders fills seats, sells stuff, and gets the Browns more national attention, buzz, and excitement than they have had in decades. Haslam needs to keep and grow his fan base because Cleveland will be moving into a new stadium in a few years, and Sanders is the kind of star power that can do just that. So even though DePodesta didn't want it to happen, and it could have caused problems, Sanders became a Brown, and as expected, everything DePodesta was afraid would happen has happened. Stefanski's coaching has been put under the national spotlight, and every flaw has been shown. With a rookie trying to learn it, the offensive system that looked bad with veteran quarterbacks looks like it came from the Stone Age. Sanders hasn't gotten enough first-team reps, hasn't been given an offensive scheme that plays to his strengths, and hasn't been protected by his coaches when things go wrong. Stefanski has instead publicly asked if Sanders is ready to let it rip, if the game is too fast for him, and if he can handle NFL speed. Haslam has apparently had enough of the excuses and deflections that have been piling up along with the losses. Our sources, who are people who know what is going on at the highest levels of the Browns organization, say that Haslam recently met with John Gruden to talk about more than just the offensive coordinator job. They may have also talked about the head coaching job itself. It seems that there were a lot of different options being talked about during these talks. One option was to make Gruden the head coach and hope that Jim Schwartz would stay on as defensive coordinator. Another possibility, and this one seems to be the most popular, is to make Schwartz the head coach and hire Gruden as the offensive coordinator to completely redesign and modernize the offense. When you look at what Jim Schwartz has done in Cleveland this season, it is clear that he would be a great choice for head coach. The Browns' defense has been top-notch, one of the best groups in the league. They carry this team from game to game. Myles Garrett is having a record-breaking season, trying to break the record for most sacks in a single season. The defensive line is putting a lot of pressure on the other team. The secondary is making mistakes. The run defense has been strong. Everything that is going well for Cleveland right now is happening on Schwartz's side of the ball. Haslam doesn't want to lose him to another team that might give him a chance to be a head coach somewhere else, according to report. Schwartz used to be the head coach in Detroit, so he knows how to run a whole organization, even if it didn't end the way he wanted it to. He has paid his dues as a coordinator, learned from his mistakes, and is clearly ready for another chance to lead a team. The players look up to him. The results speak for themselves, and maybe most importantly, it is said that Schwartz and Gruden get along very well, which would make the change easier than hiring a whole new staff from outside the company. From a football strategy point of view, this is where things get really interesting. You keep the one thing that is working, the defense, the same, while completely changing the side of the ball that has been a problem if Schwartz becomes head coach and keeps control of the defense, which is already doing very well. Then you hire John Gruden, a coach whose whole career has been based on coming up with new offensive ideas and helping quarterbacks get better. You let him design a system that is perfect for Shedeur Sanders. This isn't about making a young quarterback follow an old strict offensive philosophy. This is about making your offense work around what your quarterback does best and planning to attack the defense's weak spots instead of being scared and playing it safe. When you look at Gruden's career, his record with quarterbacks is really impressive. He turned Rich Gannon from a backup player into the league's most valuable player. He helped Brad Johnson become a Super Bowl winning quarterback. He worked with Derek Carr during some of Carr's best years in Oakland. He knows how to spot a quarterback's strengths and build an offense that makes the most of them. What do you think he could do with a quarterback like Shedeur Sanders, who has a great arm, a lot of football smarts, and comes from a family that knows a lot about football? If he had a real modern NFL offensive system to work with, what do you think he could do? The timing of all this is very important. And that is when things get really interesting in terms of when announcements might be made. Our sources say that changes are almost certainly coming, but when they happen will depend a lot on what happens this Sunday when the Browns play their next game. If Cleveland gets blown out, if the offense looks completely incompetent again, or if there is another embarrassing performance that makes it impossible to defend the coaching staff any longer, there is a good chance that Haslam could make the decision as soon as Monday. It would be completely unheard of to change coaches while there are still games left in the season. But things are bad in Cleveland right now, and when things are bad, people do bad. Most of our sources think that the more likely scenario is that Stefanski coaches the rest of the season and then gets fired right away. Maybe even within hours of the last game ending. That would give Gruden a chance to come in during the short time before the off-season officially starts. Start looking at the roster and the offensive players, and then start making plans for his system with Sanders' help on what plays and concepts he feels most comfortable running. You could have a whole new offensive philosophy in place and ready to be taught by the time the official off-season program starts. But this is the situation that has people inside the league buzzing with speculation. What if Haslam decides he can't wait any longer? What if he looks at the rest of the games on the schedule and sees that every extra week with Stefanski running the offense is another week that Sanders isn't getting better? What if he thinks that getting Gruden in the building right away, even if it is just to watch and evaluate the last few games, is worth the awkwardness and media firestorm that would follow such an unusual move? That sounds like something Jimmy Haslam would do, make a rash choice that causes problems right away, but could be the right choice in the long run. It has been very interesting to watch how the league has reacted to these rumors. Some experts are wondering if Gruden is the right choice because of his age, the fact that he hasn't coached in a few years, and the scandal that caused him to leave the Raiders. Some people are very excited about the possible hire and say that Gruden's football knowledge hasn't changed, that his quarterback skills are exactly what Cleveland needs, and that putting him with a defensive-minded head coach like Schwartz would be the perfect balance of duty. When players from other teams who have worked with Gruden before are asked about him, they almost always say good things. They talk about how well he gets ready, how much he pays attention to the little things, and how well he can explain complicated ideas to players in a way that they can understand and use. They talk about how much he loves the game, how open he is to change and new ideas, and how well he has trained quarterbacks in the past. These aren't just empty words either. These are some specific ways that Gruden helped players get better at their techniques, learn more about defenses, and play better than they had before. Having someone like Gruden design and call plays could change Shedeur Sanders' life. Sanders has to work in an offensive system that doesn't fit his strengths, and with a play caller who seems more interested in running the ball and playing it safe than attacking defenses vertically and giving the ball to his playmaker. Historically, Gruden's offenses have been aggressive, creative, and focused on the quarterback. He knows how to use motion before the snap to figure out what kind of defense is being played. He knows how to make route combinations that make it easy for quarterbacks to throw the ball. When the matchups are right, he is not afraid to take shots downfield. These are all the things that Sanders needs to do well in the NFL. This possible move could have huge effects on businesses, and that is something that can't be ignored when trying to figure out why Haslam is so eager for it to happen. In just a few years, Cleveland will open a new stadium, and that stadium is a huge financial investment that needs to be justified by keeping fans interested in making money. The Browns are now a more interesting team on a national level because John Gruden is their offensive coordinator. Having Shedeur Sanders play in a Gruden-designed offense makes for must-see TV that people outside of Cleveland's local market will want to watch. The combination could make the Browns important in primetime games and national broadcasts in a way that hasn't happened in decades. If the coaching staff and offense changed like this, sales of merchandise would almost certainly go up. Fans who have been unhappy and not paying attention all season would suddenly have a reason to think things might get better. Renewing season tickets for the new stadium would be easier. There would be more chances for businesses to sponsor events, Even if you don't think about football at all, this move makes a lot of sense for Haslam as an owner who wants to get the most money out of his franchise. They can't ignore the DePodesta side of this whole thing. It adds another layer of interest now that DePodesta, the analytics-focused general manager who came to Cleveland with big plans to modernize the company, is no longer involved. He left without a lot of media attention, but the timing is very strange when you think about everything else that was going on. Did DePodesta quit because he knew what was going to happen and didn't want to be a part of it? Did Haslam kick him out because he was tired of people questioning his football decisions? Did the Sanders draft pick cause a permanent split between the owner and the general manager that made it impossible for them to work together again? Our sources say that DePodesta really wanted to leave once Sanders was picked. He knew that the intense scrutiny and attention that would follow would expose organizational weaknesses that he couldn't fix fast enough. He understood that Stefanski's limitations as an offensive coach would become painfully obvious once Sanders arrived and national media started actually watching Browns games closely. He knew that the problems with the offensive line, the lack of playmakers at skill positions, and the old scheme would all get worse. He seems to have chosen to leave before the inevitable collapse happened, instead of taking the blame for those failures. It is not clear if Haslam was smart enough to see that DePodesta wanted out, or if he really thought DePodesta would stay and help during the Sanders era. It is clear that Haslam now has full control over football operations, and no one is questioning his choice. He seems to be using that control to make the coaching changes he's wanted to make for more than a year. There are a lot of different stories when you look at it closely. In his last 36 games, Stefanski has won 5 and lost 31. That is not just bad. That is a terrible record for a coach who won Coach of the Year just a few years ago. When a team falls apart like that, it means there are problems that go beyond just having bad luck with injuries or not having enough good players. That coach has lost the locker room, and the other team's coordinators have figured out his plans and can't change them when they don't work. It is amazing that Stefanski has lasted this long with that record. It could mean that Haslam is either very patient or very indecisive, depending on how you want to look at it. The defense that Stefanski took over and that Browns fans have been watching carry this team game after game while the offense struggles is what the whole team could have been if Schwartz had coached them all with the same skill and creativity he brings to his side of the ball. Think about what would happen if the offense was just okay, like in the middle of the pack. Not great, but it works. The defense has been so good that this Browns team could really be in the running for a playoff spot. Instead, they are deciding whether to change coaches in the middle of the season or wait a few more weeks, because one side of the ball is completely broken and the other side is doing great. For Browns fans who have been let down, given false hope, and seen their team fall apart for decades, this possible coaching change is something they've wanted for years. Accountability means being willing to admit a mistake and fix it, instead of sticking with failure out of pride or fear of admitting you were wrong. If Haslam really fires Stefanski, hires Gruden, and promotes Schwartz, and if he really builds an offense around Sanders' strengths instead of forcing him into a system that doesn't work for him, it would be a big change for the way this organization. Of course, the risk is that this is just another false dawn, another change that gets people excited for a short time before letting them down. Browns fans have seen this movie before. A new coach comes in and promises to be innovative and responsible. Things get a little better before they level off and then get worse. After that, the process starts over with another search for a coach. To break that cycle, you need to not only make changes but also make the right changes, and then wait for those changes to happen without getting scared when things get hard. But there are reasons to think that this time could be different. Jim Schwartz has shown that he can play defense well this season. He is not a mystery person or a bad hire. Right now in Cleveland, he has shown that he can coach at a very high level. Jon Gruden is a well-known NFL coach with a history of developing quarterbacks and running offense. You may have some problems with his personality or the fact that he hasn't coached in a while, but he is a well-known NFL coach. This isn't a college coach making the jump or a coordinator who has never called plays at this level before. These are NFL coaches who have been around for decades and have won Super Bowls. Shedeur Sanders is still a young quarterback with a long career ahead of him. which is probably the most important thing. If Gruden can get in there quickly, start building an offensive system around Sanders' strengths, and give him the coaching and development that Stefanski has completely failed to do, there is a good chance that Sanders could become the franchise quarterback that Cleveland has needed for decades. There is clearly a lot of talent. It is clear that he knows a lot about football. He has advantages that most new players don't have because of his family history and the coaching he got from his father. What he needs is good professional coaching that gives him the tools he needs to succeed. And that is exactly what Gruden could offer. It will be very interesting to see what happens in Cleveland over the next few days and weeks. People will look for clues about what is coming in every press conference, injury report, and even small comments from players or coaches. There will be a lot of speculation. The hot takes will come in waves. And in the middle of all that noise, choices are being made that will affect the future of this franchise for a long time.
There aren't many
will
days
Haslam
left for
have
Kevin
the guts
Stefanski
to make
be
the
the head coach
changes
of the
that need
Cleveland
to be
Browns.
made?
And
Will
we're not talking
Stefanski
about
coach
weeks
his last
or even
game
months
this Sunday
anymore.
without being
It's
aware?